Hey guys, tonight we re-dive into something so monumentally boring that it might actually achieve what no meditation app has: manage genuine deep sleep. Picture yourself as a mid-level civil servant in Korea's Joseon Dynasty, circa 1580, where excitement means finding a typo in a tax ledger and adventure consists of walking to a different government office. You're about to experience bureaucratic tedium so profound that modern office workers would weep with recognition. Probably won't survive this without falling asleep, which is exactly the point. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're re-listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world eye. Love seeing our global community of insomniacs and history nerds unite in their quest for better sleep. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The rooster hasn't even considered crowing when you stir in your cramped Hanak quarters. It's nestled within the sprawling government compound in what will someday be called Seoul. The Ondel heating system beneath your floor has grown cold during the night, and you can see your breath in the pre-dawn darkness. Your sleeping mat, thin as rice paper and about as comfortable, has left permanent indentations in your hip bones. This is luxury compared to your student days, you remind yourself. Though that's like saying a paper cut is preferable to having your arm severed. You rise not because you want to, but because the bronze bell at the palace has already chimed the hour of the tiger between 3 and 5 a.m. in our modern reckoning, and tardiness is a career-ending offense in the rigid hierarchy of Joseon bureaucracy. Your morning routine unfolds with the mechanical precision of a water clock. Splash frigid water on your face from the ceramic basin, arrange your top knot with mathematical precision, and don your official robes with their color-coded rank indicators that everyone scrutinizes like fashion police at the Met Gala. The Joseon Dynasty, which ruled Korea from 1392 to 1897, created one of history's most elaborate bureaucratic systems, making modern corporate hierarchies look like anarchist collectives by comparison. Your particular shade of pale blue silk announces to the world that you, V, achieve the rank of junior clerk in the Ministry of Revenue, a position that sounds important until you realize it mostly involves counting beans. Literally, mountains of beans. Alongside rice, barley, and other grains that form the tax backbone of the kingdom, as you stumble through the courtyard toward the morning assembly, you notice how the other officials avoid eye contact, each absorbed in their own survival calculations. Historians still argue whether this social isolation was a deliberate feature of Confucian governance or just an unfortunate side effect of putting bookish introverts in charge of running a country. The morning mist clings to the curved rooftops like the dying dreams of career advancement, and you can hear the distant sound of street vendors beginning their daily routines, a reminder of the vibrant world that exists beyond these suffocating administrative walls. Your stomach rumbles, but breakfast is still hours away. The morning meal, when it finally arrives, will consist of rice so perfectly white it hurts your eyes, accompanied by pickled vegetables that have achieved a level of sourness that could strip paint. The court nutritionists have calculated the optimal caloric intake for sustained bureaucratic performance, which apparently hovers somewhere between monk in training and particularly ascetic hermit.
Ow.
You shuffle into the main hall, where dozens of other officials stand in perfect rows, arranged by rank with the precision of a military formation. The silence is so complete, you can hear your own eyelids blinking. This is your life now. measured breathing, careful postures, and the constant awareness that someone is always watching, always judging, always ready to report the slightest deviation from protocol to someone higher up the food chain. The morning briefing begins with a reading of imperial edicts announcements, so numbingly procedural they make modern software license agreements seem thrilling. Today's excitement includes revised guidelines for measuring grain storage containers and updated protocols for addressing correspondence to provincial governors. You stand motionless, your mind wandering to the philosophical question that has plagued you for years. Is this actually living, or just an extremely elaborate form of waiting to die? The path to your current state of professional misery began decades ago. When your father first mentioned the Guagyo examinations with the same tone most parents reserve for discussing college, admissions equal parts hope and impending financial ruin. You were barely tall enough to see over the family's writing desk when he started drilling classical Chinese characters into your developing brain. Each stroke burned into your memory through endless repetition. That would make modern tiger parents seem relaxed by comparison. The Guagyo system, established in 958 during the Goryeo Dynasty and perfected under Joseon rule, represented Korea's version of the Chinese imperial examination system, a meritocratic dream that turned into a generational nightmare for ambitious families. You spent your teenage years hunched over texts so ancient that Confucius himself might have found them. Tediously old-fashioned memorizing passages about proper governance while your contemporaries were out discovering the opposite sex and learning useful skills like farming or blacksmithing. Your study routine began before sunrise and ended well after sunset. A schedule that would violate modern child labor laws in 17 different ways. The 4 books and 5 classics became your unwilling companions. The Great Learning. The Doctrine of the Mean, the Analects, and Mencius, followed by the Book of Changes, Book of Documents, Book of Songs, Book of Rites, and Spring and Autumn Annals. Each text dense with moral philosophy that seemed designed to cure insomnia rather than inspire governance. The preliminary examinations held at the county level eliminated roughly 90% of candidates through a process that combined academic rigor with psychological torture. You sat in a cramped wooden booth for 3 days, writing essays on topics like the proper method of harmonizing agricultural policy with celestial movements, while surviving on rice balls that tasted like disappointment and lukewarm tea that had achieved the consistency of pond water. Historians still argue whether the Guagyu system genuinely promoted talent or simply rewarded the ability to endure mind-numbing memorization without suffering complete mental breakdown. Statistics suggest the latter of the thousands who attempted the examinations each cycle. Fewer than 50 typically passed all levels. Your success rate was roughly equivalent to winning the lottery, except instead of money, you won the privilege of spending your life in government service. The secondary examinations, held in the capital, introduced new layers of complexity that would impress modern standardized test designers. You had to demonstrate not only perfect recall of classical texts, but also the ability to compose poetry in Chinese write elegant calligraphy and discuss governmental theory with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely believed that proper tax collection was the highest form of human expression. The irony wasn't lost on you that preparation for governing involved years of complete isolation from actual human society. Your fellow candidates became both allies and enemies in this intellectual gladiator arena. You formed study groups that met in drafty rooms above noodle shops, sharing notes and anxiety in equal measure. The camaraderie was genuine, but everyone understood that friendship ended when examination results were posted. You'd seen grown men weep over failed attempts, their decades of preparation reduced to a single sheet of paper announcing their inadequacy. The final metropolitan examination lasted 9 grueling days, testing everything from military strategy to agricultural management to the proper etiquette for addressing deceased emperors. You wrote until your fingers cramped into permanent claws, producing essays that balance scholarly depth with the kind of bureaucratic blandness that suggested you'd never have an original thought that might threaten established order. Innovation was discouraged. Conformity was rewarded. The waiting period after examinations felt like purgatory designed by particularly creative demons. Results were announced months later in a ceremony that combined the drama of a medieval tournament with the excitement of watching paint dry. Names were read in order of ranking, and if you heard yours called, you'd successfully joined the Yangban class, the scholarly elite who ran the kingdom through a combination of inherited privilege and demonstrated ability to remain conscious during extremely boring meetings. Your success came on the 3rd attempt, by which time you were old enough to question whether victory felt different from defeat. The celebration feast your family threw featured enough alcohol to pickle a small village. Though you spent most of it calculating how many years of service you'd need to justify the education costs, your parents beamed with pride, unaware that they'd essentially sentenced their son to a lifetime of professional tedium, punctuated by moments of acute anxiety whenever superior officials visited your office. The palace hierarchy operates on a system so intricate it makes chess look like tic-tac-toe. And you've spent years learning that your survival depends entirely on knowing exactly how low to bow to each person you encounter. The depth of your bow must be calibrated with mathematical precision. 15 degrees for colleagues of equal rank, 30 degrees for immediate superiors, 45 degrees for department heads, and a full 90-degree prostration for anyone who might theoretically have access to the king's breakfast menu. Getting this wrong isn't just embarrassing, it's career suicide wrapped in silk robes. Your daily navigation through the palace compound resembles an elaborate dance, choreographed by someone with obsessive-compulsive disorder and a sadistic sense of humor. Each morning, you plot your route between buildings like a military strategist, calculating which paths minimize encounters with officials who outrank you by enough to demand the kind of bowing that leaves your spine feeling like a pretzel. The Gyeongbok Palace complex, rebuilt in 1395 after the founding of Joseon, sprawls across 410,000 square meters of pure bureaucratic intimidation, its countless courtyards and corridors designed to remind everyone of their insignificance. The clothing hierarchy adds another layer of complexity that would challenge a professional costume designer. Your pale blue silk announces your junior status to anyone with functioning eyeballs, while the purple-clad officials glide past you like aristocratic ghosts, their elevated status literally written in thread. The king, when he deigns to appear, wears robes so elaborately decorated they probably require their own staff to maintain dragons, and phoenixes embroidered in gold thread that costs more than your annual salary. Protocol dictates that you must stop walking and assume a respectful posture whenever anyone of higher rank approaches, which means your daily commute between offices involves more starting and stopping than a broken carriage. You've developed an almost supernatural ability to identify approaching footsteps by their rhythm and confidence level. The quick, nervous steps belong to fellow junior officials. The measured, deliberate pace signals middle management. and the slow, regal stride that makes everyone else freeze like deer belongs to the senior ministers who could end your career with a disappointed sigh. The morning audience sessions test your ability to remain motionless for hours, while more senior officials present reports that could bore a statue to sleep. You stand in your designated spot precisely, marked on the floor to prevent any confusion about your place in the cosmic order. While listening to discussions about rice quotas and bridge repairs delivered in the monotone perfected by centuries of court speakers, historians still argue whether this deliberate tedium was designed to test official endurance, or simply evolved naturally from putting scholarly introverts in charge of public speaking. Your interaction with actual nobility occurs so rarely it feels mythical, like spotting a unicorn or finding a government office that operates efficiently. When princes or high-ranking court ladies pass through your section, the protocol requires you to practically melt into the floor tiles, your existence becoming so minimal that you question whether you're still technically alive. These encounters leave you with cramps in muscles you didn't know existed, and a renewed appreciation for your normally humble circumstances. The dining hall hierarchy ensures that even meals become exercises in social stratification. You eat at tables arranged by rank, consuming rice whose quality corresponds directly to your position in the bureaucratic food chain. Senior officials dine on grains so white and perfect they seem to glow, while you chew through rice that's merely adequate, accompanied by side dishes that suggest the kitchen staff has a clear understanding of everyone's relative importance. The portions are calculated to provide exactly enough nutrition to maintain productivity without encouraging anyone to get ideas above their station. Conversation during meals follows strict protocols that would challenge a United Nations diplomat. You can speak to colleagues of equal rank about approved topics like weather patterns and grain storage techniques. But any attempt at humor or personal opinion must be carefully vetted to ensure it does, and accidentally imply criticism of superior officials or, heaven forbid, royal policy. Most meals pass in silence so complete you can hear your own digestive processes, which isn't particularly appetizing but does provide a meditative quality that helps prepare you for the afternoon's bureaucratic challenges. The afternoon protocol reviews feel like military drills designed by someone who's never seen actual combat, but has strong opinions about proper posture. You practice entering rooms, exiting rooms, presenting documents, receiving documents, and standing in various formations until muscle memory takes over and you could probably bow appropriately while unconscious. These sessions serve as constant reminders that in the Joseon court, form matters far more than function, and appearing competent often trumps actually being competent. Your writing desk has become both altar and torture device, a sacred space where you spend 8 hours daily transforming government correspondence into calligraphic masterpieces that no one will ever read with pleasure. The brush in your hand weighs practically nothing, yet after years of service, it feels heavier than a peasant's farming tools. Each stroke must be perfect, not merely legible, but aesthetically pleasing enough to reflect well on your department's commitment to bureaucratic beauty. One smudged character can result in recopying an entire document, turning a simple tax notice into a day-long artistic endeavor. The paperwork mountain on your desk grows daily like some mythical beast that feeds on human sanity. Requisition forms for brush repairs, reports on regional grain storage, correspondence between provincial governors and the central government, updates on bridge construction projects that started before your grandfather was born. each document requiring the same meticulous attention to detail that Renaissance masters devoted to religious frescoes. The irony isn't lost on you that you're recreating works of art that exist solely to document the movement of soybeans. Your brush technique has evolved into a meditation practice that would impress Buddhist monks. If monks were forced to meditate on tax collection procedures, each character requires precise pressure, perfect timing, and the kind of focused attention that blocks out everything else in the universe, including your growing awareness that you're re-spending your finite existence copying other people's thoughts about administrative minutiae. The black ink flows like liquid boredom, leaving behind beautiful symbols that announce to the world just how thoroughly organized your kingdom's bureaucracy has become. The four treasures of the study brush, ink, paper, and inkstone represent the tools of your trade with the same reverence that warriors show their weapons. Your brush, made from wolf hair and bamboo, has been your constant companion for so long, you've named it Silent Suffering. The ink, ground fresh each morning from solid ink cakes, creates a meditation ritual that helps prepare your mind for the day's intellectual numbing. The paper, handcrafted from mulberry bark, costs more than many families spend on food. Yet you go through sheets like a modern office worker burns through printer paper. The copyist's art demands perfection that would challenge a master forger. Each document must match the original not just in content but in style, spacing, and overall aesthetic appeal. You've developed the ability to mimic different officials' handwriting styles, a skill that occasionally makes you wonder if you're retraining to be a bureaucrat or a highly educated criminal. The standardized formats for different types of documents, reports, quests, announcements, reprimands follow templates so rigid they could have been designed by machines if machines existed and had particularly boring programming. Your daily quota varies depending on document complexity, but averages around 15 completed forms per day. Simple grain inventory reports can be finished quickly, while complex legal correspondence requires hours of careful attention to ensure that every classical Chinese character conveys precisely the intended meaning. Historians still argue whether this obsession with calligraphic perfection improved governmental efficiency or simply provided employment for people who would otherwise have become artists or philosophers. The ink stains on your fingers have become permanent badges of service, marking you as clearly as any official uniform. Your right hand has developed a callus from brush grip that serves as a conversation starter with fellow scribes. Though conversations about occupational injuries aren't particularly thrilling, the muscle memory of proper stroke order has become so ingrained that you sometimes catch yourself writing characters in the air when you're rethinking, like a conductor directing an orchestra of bureaucratic tedium. Quality control inspections add another layer of anxiety to your daily routine. Senior clerks review your work with the intensity of art critics examining suspected forgeries, checking not just for accuracy but for appropriate aesthetic flair. A character that's technically correct but lacks proper balance can earn you a lecture on the importance of maintaining departmental standards. These reviews feel like being graded on your ability to make boredom beautiful, which is perhaps the most specialized skill in human history. Your lunch breaks provide the only escape from calligraphic perfection, though even then you find yourself admiring the brushwork on menu boards and shop signs. The outside world-esque casual approach to writing, functional but not. Beautiful seems almost scandalous after years of treating every document like a potential museum piece. You've developed an appreciation for the artistry in administrative work that borders on Stockholm Syndrome, is finding genuine satisfaction in a perfectly balanced character, even when that character is part of a report on sewage management. The evening cleanup ritual involves carefully washing your brushes, storing your inkstone, and organizing your workspace for tomorrow's challenges. Routine has become as automatic as breathing, a daily ceremony that marks the transition from productive suffering to the brief respite of personal time before sleep. Your provincial assignments transport you from the suffocating comfort of palace bureaucracy into the rustic chaos of rural Korea, where your carefully cultivated skills and document aesthetics meet the harsh reality of farmers who view tax collectors with roughly the same enthusiasm they show a plague of locusts. The journey to outlying districts involves days of travel on roads that optimistically call themselves roads, but more accurately resemble organized mud wrestling venues designed by sadistic engineers who've never seen a proper wheel. The government palanquin that carries you to these remote assignments provides all the comfort of a wooden coffin with delusions of grandeur. Your traveling companion's fellow tax assessors, a military escort who looks perpetually disappointed with his assignment, and a secretary whose job involves documenting your documentation, bounce, along mountain paths while discussing the finer points of grain measurement with the enthusiasm of people who've forgotten that normal human conversations exist. The scenery outside your curtained window shifts from palace courtyards to terraced rice fields that stretch toward mountains shrouded in mist and peasant resentment. Village headmen greet your arrival with smiles so forced they appear to cause physical pain, their faces arranged in expressions of welcome that wouldn't fool a moderately intelligent child. These local officials have mastered the art of appearing cooperative, while providing information so vague it borders on philosophical abstraction. When you ask about grain stores, they launch into elaborate explanations about weather patterns, soil conditions, and historical precedents that somehow never quite answer your actual questions, but consume enough time to make thorough investigation impractical. The granary inspections reveal storage facilities that seem to exist in a quantum state of simultaneously being full and empty. Depending on who's asking and what they plan to do with the information, you climb rickety ladders to peer into wooden containers that smell like centuries of accumulated agriculture counting. Bags of rice with the enthusiasm of someone who's realized that their classical education didn't include practical courses in how to argue with farmers about math. The discrepancies between reported harvests and actual storage would challenge a forensic accountant, assuming forensic accountants existed and had training in rural Korean agricultural practices. Your negotiations with village representatives followed diplomatic protocols that would impress international treaty negotiators. If international treaty negotiators were required to conduct business while sitting on straw mats in buildings that leak whenever someone sneezes too hard, the farmers present their cases with the patience of people who've been having this same conversation with government officials since before your grandfather was born. Their arguments polished through generations of practice in the ancient art of creative compliance with imperial tax policy. The actual counting process involves mathematical calculations that would challenge modern computers, assuming modern computers were designed to operate while being surrounded by suspicious farmers and distracted by chickens wandering through your workspace. You tally bushels of rice, barley, and beans with measuring tools that were probably calibrated during the previous dynasty and have since achieved a level of accuracy that falls somewhere between roughly correct and close enough for government work. Each measurement must be recorded in triplicate because apparently even rural tax collection requires enough paperwork to deforest a small mountain. Historians still argue whether the Joseon tax system was designed to be incomprehensible or simply evolved that way through centuries of bureaucratic accretion. Like coral reefs built from fossilized confusion, the regulations fill volumes that would challenge a dedicated scholar, covering everything from weather-related exemptions to proper procedures for measuring irregularly shaped grain storage containers. You've memorized these rules with the same dedication medieval monks applied to religious texts, though your salvation involves accurate bean counting rather than eternal redemption. The evening reports you compile in village. Inns capture the day's discoveries in prose, so neutral it could put insomniacs to sleep faster than warm milk. Each paragraph documents measurements, observations, and recommendations with the emotional intensity of someone describing paint, drawing techniques to an audience of particularly uninterested paint. Your writing style has evolved to convey maximum information while expressing minimum personality. A literary achievement that would impress critics who value bureaucratic minimalism. Local cuisine during these assignments provides cultural experiences that broaden your appreciation for palace food. Regardless of how uninspiring you previously found it, village meals feature ingredients that were fresh sometime within the current season, prepared with cooking techniques that emphasize functionality over flavor. The rice wine, however, offers compensation for dietary hardships, though drinking too much would compromise your ability to count accurately, which represents the only skill that justifies your presence in these remote locations. Your return journey to the capital feels like emerging from an alternate universe where everything operates according to principles that make perfect sense to people who never worked in government. The familiar sight of palace walls brings relief mixed with the resignation of someone who's discovered that bureaucratic tedium feels almost exciting compared to rural administrative challenges. The royal audience chamber exists in a realm of terror so refined, it makes your usual workplace anxiety feel like a gentle massage. You spend weeks preparing for these rare moments before the king, rehearsing every gesture until your movements achieve the mechanical precision of a court-approved automaton. Your stomach churns with the kind of nervous energy that would power a small village, while your mind cycles through catastrophic scenarios involving misplaced intestine, Beau's forgotten protocols, and the various creative ways your career could end in spectacular public humiliation. The preparation ritual begins at dawn on audience day, when you dance ceremonial robes that cost more than most people's houses and feel roughly as comfortable, wearing a straitjacket made of silk and social expectations. Your colleagues help you achieve the perfect arrangement of fabric and accessories. Each adjustment scrutinized with the intensity of surgeons preparing for a particularly delicate operation. The mirror reflects someone who looks like a government official playing dress-up. Which isn't far from the truth, though. Admitting this would constitute treason against the dignity of your position. The waiting area outside the throne room resembles a gathering of extremely well-dressed people auditioning for roles in a play about institutional anxiety. Fellow officials practice their presentations in whispered rehearsals, their movements betraying the same barely controlled panic that afflicts anyone who's about to perform for someone with the power to make their problems disappear along with their lives. The silence is broken only by the occasional nervous cough and the rustling of silk as someone adjusts their posture for the 1000th time. Your presentation materials have been prepared with the obsessive attention to detail that characterizes everything in Palace's life. The documents are written on paper so fine it seems to glow, bound with ribbons that were probably blessed by monks specializing in bureaucratic accessories. Every character has been inspected for perfection. Every line measured for proper spacing. Every fold calculated to create the exact impression of competent service to the royal administration. You've memorized your speech with the dedication of an actor preparing for the performance of their lifetime, which it essentially is. The actual approach to the throne involves a walk that feels like the world's most terrifying runway show, where stumbling means more than just embarrassment. It suggests incompetence serious enough to question your fitness for government service. The protocol requires you to advance in measured steps, each one precisely timed to demonstrate both respect and confidence. A combination that would challenge a professional dancer under normal circumstances. Your peripheral vision captures glimpses of court officials whose expressions suggest they mentally calculating the odds of witnessing a career-ending mistake. King Seonjo, who ruled from 1567 to 1608, possessed the kind of presence that made grown men forget their own names and occasionally their reason for existing. His throne, elevated on a platform that required you to crane your neck at angles that would challenge a contortionist, served as both seat and symbol of power so absolute it made your morning supervisor meetings feel like casual conversations between equals. The royal regalia, crown robes, and ceremonial accessories created a visual display of authority that would impress Hollywood costume designers working with unlimited budgets. Historians still argue whether the elaborate court ceremonials enhanced royal dignity or simply provided employment for people who might otherwise have become useful members of society. The rituals surrounding royal audiences followed scripts so detailed they made modern diplomatic protocols seem improvised. Every gesture, every phrase, every moment of silence was choreographed to reinforce the cosmic order that placed the king at the center of civilization and everyone else arranged in descending circles of importance that eventually included you. Somewhere near the outer edge where the light barely reaches. Your actual presentation lasts approximately 3 minutes. Though your preparation consumed weeks and your recovery will require days, the king listens with the expression of someone who's heard similar reports countless times and has achieved a state of enlightened boredom that transcends normal human experience. His responses, when they come, are delivered in royal language so formal it sounds like ancient spirits communicating through ceremonial protocols rather than normal human speech patterns. The royal questions test your ability to provide information while avoiding any suggestion that you possess opinions about policy or, worse yet, ideas about how things might be improved. Your answers must demonstrate thorough knowledge while maintaining the humble acknowledgement. You exist solely to implement decisions made by people far wiser and more important than yourself. This conversational style, perfected over years of practice, allows you to communicate facts while expressing no personality whatsoever. The dismissal ceremony requires backing away from the throne while maintaining appropriate posture, and eye contact patterns that honor royal dignity without suggesting presumptuous equality. Your exit from the audience chamber feels like escaping from a beautiful prison, where the guards are armed with etiquette violations. Instead of weapons, though, the consequences of failure, in either situation, could prove equally devastating to your future prospects. The scholarly debates that punctuate your workday represent intellectual combat disguised as polite conversation, where victory is measured in subtle nods of approval and defeat arrives through the gentle, but devastating art of being ignored by your colleagues. You gather in the ministry's discussion hall, a room designed to inspire deep thinking, but mainly successful at inspiring deep. Anxiety about whether your contributions will reveal you as the intellectual fraud you secretly suspect yourself to be. The circular seating arrangement creates an illusion of equality that everyone understands is purely decorative. Since the real hierarchy operates according to rules more complex than the philosophical principles you're supposedly discussing, today's topic involves the proper application of Confucian principles to tax collection policies, a subject that combines moral philosophy with administrative tedium in ways that would challenge the most creative torture specialists. Your colleagues approach this discussion with the enthusiasm of people who genuinely believe that finding the correct interpretation of ancient texts will somehow improve the lives of farmers who spend their days worrying about more practical concerns like crop failures and bandit raids. The irony of using 2,000-year-old wisdom to solve contemporary problems seems lost on everyone except you, though admitting this would mark you as dangerously practical. Minister Kim opens the session with observations about the relationship between virtuous governance and agricultural productivity, his voice carrying the measured cadence of someone who's discovered that speaking slowly makes shallow thoughts sound profound. He quotes extensively from the Analects, each citation delivered with the timing of a master performer who knows his audience will applaud ancient wisdom regardless of its relevance to current circumstances. His arguments flow like honey mixed with bureaucratic jargon, sweet enough to seem appealing but thick enough to slow down any attempt at practical application. Your fellow junior officials contribute observations that demonstrate their familiarity with classical texts, while carefully avoiding any suggestions that might be interpreted as criticism of current policies. The conversation follows patterns established by centuries of scholarly discourse, where participants compete to display their education while avoiding the career-damaging mistake of having genuinely original thoughts. Everyone speaks in the kind of measured, formal language that transforms simple ideas into elaborate constructions, requiring multiple subordinate clauses and frequent references to deceased philosophers. The debate about benevolent governance versus administrative efficiency consumes to hours that feel like geological epics, with each participant adding layers of classical quotations that obscure rather than illuminate the underlying issues. You contribute carefully vetted comments about the harmony between moral leadership and practical implementation. Phrases you've rehearsed to sound thoughtful without actually meaning anything specific enough to be wrong. Historians still argue whether these scholarly discussions influenced actual policy or simply provided intellectual exercise for officials who needed to justify their classical educations. Senior Minister Lee introduces the question of whether tax collection can be considered a form of moral instruction, a philosophical puzzle that would challenge monks with too much time on their hands. His analysis draws from Mencius, Jushi, and other thinkers, who presumably never had to explain to angry farmers why their grain stores were being requisitioned for the greater good. The discussion that follows involves such elaborate logical constructions that you begin to suspect everyone has forgotten the original question, though admitting confusion would suggest inadequate preparation or, of worse, insufficient reverence for intellectual tradition. Your lunch break provides temporary escape from philosophical combat, though even the dining hall conversations revolve around scholarly matters that would bore civilian populations into catatonic states. Colleagues discuss the finer points of classical commentary with the passion that normal people reserve for topics like food, romance, or whether their roofs will survive the next storm. You've learned to nod appropriately during these conversations, while privately wondering if this is what happens to human beings who spend too much time thinking about ancient books instead of contemporary reality. The afternoon session shifts focus to the practical implementation of moral governance, a topic that finally promises to connect philosophical principles with actual administrative challenges. Unfortunately, the discussion quickly devolves into arguments about proper citation formats and whether certain classical interpretations have been accurately transmitted through successive commentaries. You realize that your colleagues are more concerned with intellectual orthodoxy than practical effectiveness. A revelation that would be depressing if you hadn't already suspected as much. The final hour involves individual presentations where each participant summarizes their understanding of the day's discussions, creating a feedback loop of scholarly repetition that approaches the sublime in its complete disconnection from anything resembling useful knowledge. Your own presentation includes the required classical references, appropriate humble acknowledgments of your intellectual limitations, and carefully worded conclusions that could mean almost anything depending on the listener's interpretation. The session concludes with senior officials expressing satisfaction at the day's intellectual progress, though none of them can articulate exactly what has been accomplished beyond the successful demonstration that everyone present has memorized the appropriate classical texts. You leave the discussion hall feeling simultaneously educated and ignorant. Intellectually stimulated and practically useless, a combination that perfectly captures the essence of Confucian bureaucratic education. The seasonal ceremonies that punctuate your administrative calendar transform the palace into a theater of agricultural spirituality, where grown men perform elaborate rituals designed to ensure cosmic harmony and adequate rainfall, though mostly they ensure that everyone involved develops intimate knowledge of ceremonial boredom. These events celebrate the eternal cycle of planting, growing, and harvesting that sustains the kingdom, while simultaneously demonstrating that people with too much education and insufficient manual labor can turn even the most basic human activities into performance art, requiring weeks of preparation and memorization. The spring plowing ceremony kicks off the agricultural year with festivities that would exhaust professional entertainers. Though entertainment is exactly the right word for watching government officials pretend to understand farming while wearing silk robes worth more than most villages' annual income. You spend days rehearsing your role in the procession, which involves carrying a ceremonial scroll documenting proper agricultural techniques, while walking at precisely the correct pace behind officials whose understanding of actual farming comes entirely from classical texts written by people who also never held a real plow. Your ceremonial costume for these events makes your regular court attire look practically casual by comparison. The elaborate hat alone requires an engineering degree to wear properly. Its multiple layers and decorative elements carefully arranged to suggest both scholarly dignity and agricultural awareness. A combination that would challenge a professional costume designer working with unlimited time and resources. The robes feature embroidered patterns of rice plants and farming tools that were probably designed by artists who thought vegetables grew on trees and considered dirt a kind of outdoor carpet. The ritual choreography follows scripts so detailed they make modern Broadway productions seem improvised. Every step, gesture, and moment of reverent silence has been calculated to demonstrate proper respect for the agricultural spirits who presumably control weather patterns and crop yields. You've memorized sequences of movements that would challenge professional dancers. Though your audience consists mainly of other government officials who are equally mystified by the connection between ceremonial precision and actual food production. The morning procession begins before dawn, when the combination of elaborate costumes and insufficient sleep creates a surreal atmosphere that feels like participating in a very slow, very formal zombie movie. Your fellow officials stumble through the choreographed movements with the glazed expressions of people who've transcended normal consciousness through pure ritual repetition. The route takes you through palace courtyards, where every stone has been swept, and every decoration arranged with the obsessive attention to detail that characterizes everything in Joseon court life. The actual ceremony takes place in the palace's agricultural demonstration area, a carefully maintained garden where theoretical farming meets practical impossibility. The soil has been prepared with the same meticulous care that goes into preparing royal documents, each furrow measured and aligned according to principles that combine agricultural science with geometric aesthetics. The seeds you ceremonially plant are so perfectly selected and arranged that they suggest farming is practiced by people who've never seen an actual field, much less worked in one. Historians still argue whether these agricultural ceremonies actually influenced crop yields or simply provided seasonal entertainment for officials who needed periodic breaks from their regular administrative duties. The prayers and invocations delivered during the rituals ask for favorable weather and abundant Harvests with the confidence of people who believe bureaucratic procedures can negotiate with natural forces. The language used in these ceremonies combines religious reverence with agricultural terminology in ways that would confuse both farmers and theologians. The Autumn Harvest Festival represents the ceremonial culmination of the agricultural year, featuring celebrations that would impress party planners specializing in events where the primary activity involves standing in formation while listening to speeches about the cosmic significance of grain storage. Your role in these festivities requires you to display appropriate gratitude for the year's agricultural bounty, while maintaining the dignity expected of someone whose actual contribution to food production involves counting other people's rice and documenting the results in beautiful handwriting. The ceremonial feast that concludes each seasonal celebration features dishes prepared with ingredients that were presumably blessed by agricultural spirits and prepared by cooks who understand the connection between ceremonial presentation and nutritional value. The menu includes seasonal specialties that taste like they were designed by committee to represent the essence of each agricultural period, and to provide enjoyable eating experiences. You consume these symbolic meals with the appreciation of someone who's learned to find meaning in activities that would challenge normal human tolerance for organized tedium. The evening cleanup after ceremonial events involves returning elaborate costumes and props to storage areas that look like museums dedicated to the history of agricultural theater. Your regular court attire feels almost casual by comparison, though you've developed enough appreciation for ritual precision to miss the elaborate ceremonies once they're over. The return to normal administrative duties feels like awakening from a dream where everyone agreed to pretend that paperwork about farming was the same thing as actual farming, though the distinction sometimes blurs after years of bureaucratic service. The annual personnel evaluations transform your workplace into a battlefield, where weapons are replaced by carefully worded assessments and casualties are measured in damaged reputations rather than physical wounds. You approach review season with the same enthusiasm most people reserve for root canal surgery, knowing that your professional future depends on navigating a process that combines psychological warfare with administrative procedure in ways that would impress military strategists specializing in bureaucratic torture. The evaluation forms themselves represent masterpieces of diplomatic language, designed to communicate devastating criticism through phrases so polite they could be mistaken for compliments by people unfamiliar with the subtle art of professional assassination. Your own performance review requires weeks of preparation that would challenge a presidential campaign. Manager working with unlimited resources and insufficient time. You compile evidence of your contributions to departmental efficiency, document your attendance at mandatory meetings, prepare responses to questions about your commitment to Confucian principles in tax collection methodology. The portfolio you assemble includes samples of your calligraphy testimonials from colleagues who owe you favors, and detailed explanations of how your work supports the broader goals of agricultural administration and cosmic harmony. 2. Concepts that seem related only in the minds of people who write government evaluation criteria. The preliminary self-assessment asks you to rate your own performance using scales that would challenge philosophers, specializing in the measurement of abstract concepts. Questions about your harmonious integration of classical learning with practical application require answers that demonstrate both appropriate humility and sufficient confidence to suggest continued employment prospects. You've learned to write self-evaluations that sound like they were composed by someone who is simultaneously proud of their achievements and ashamed of their existence. A literary feat that represents years of training in bureaucratic self-presentation. Your supervisor's evaluation meeting feels like attending your own trial, except the judge is someone whose own job security depends on identifying enough problems with your performance to justify their supervisory position while avoiding criticism so severe it reflects poorly on their management abilities. Senior Clerk Park approaches these sessions with the demeanor of someone who's discovered the perfect balance between constructive criticism and career destruction. His comments delivered with the timing of a master torturer who understands that psychological pressure requires careful calibration to achieve maximum effectiveness without causing complete breakdown. The evaluation criteria include measurements of qualities that would challenge omniscient beings to assess accurately. Your devotion to administrative excellence gets scored alongside your contribution to departmental harmony and your demonstration of classical learning in practical contexts. These assessments require evaluators to quantify characteristics that exist primarily in the realm of imagination. Though everyone involved treats the process with the seriousness of people who believe that bureaucratic procedures can capture the essence of human worth through standardized numerical ratings, your colleagues' evaluations become sources of intelligence gathering that would impress professional spies working in hostile territory. You develop sophisticated methods for determining who's receiving favorable reviews, whose performance has been questioned, and which positions might become available through the mysterious process of administrative reorganization. The office atmosphere during evaluation season resembles a combination of library and battlefield, where whispered conversations and carefully neutral expressions mask strategic calculations about survival and advancement in the government hierarchy. Historians still argue whether the Joseon personnel evaluation system promoted governmental efficiency or simply created employment for people who might otherwise have become useful members of society. The elaborate procedures for assessing official performance required more time and resources than many actual governmental functions. Though everyone involved agreed that measuring bureaucratic effectiveness was essential for maintaining the cosmic order that kept the kingdom functioning properly. The irony that evaluation procedures often consumed more energy than the work being evaluated seemed lost on administrators who had invested their careers in perfecting the measurement of administrative perfection. The peer review component introduces elements of mutual surveillance that would fascinate social scientists studying the intersection of friendship and professional survival. Your colleagues must provide assessments of your character, competence, and commitment to governmental service while maintaining the pretense that these evaluations can affect your future relationship with people you see every day. The resulting feedback reads like diplomatic correspondence between friendly nations who are secretly planning each other's destruction, though the warfare involves career advancement rather than territorial conquest. The final evaluation conference brings together all stakeholders in your professional existence for a discussion that combines the formality of judicial proceedings with the intimacy of family therapy sessions. Conducted by people who barely tolerate each other's presence, your supervisor presents findings, colleagues offer observations, and you provide responses that demonstrate appropriate gratitude for constructive criticism, while defending your professional competence with the desperation of someone whose livelihood depends on convincing people that you simultaneously. It's humble and indispensable. The evaluation results arrive weeks later in documents that require careful interpretation to understand whether you've been praised, criticized, or simply acknowledged as a continuing presence in the governmental ecosystem. The language used in these assessments achieves levels of diplomatic ambiguity that could serve as models for international treaty negotiations. Though your career prospects depend on decoding messages that seem designed to mean everything and nothing simultaneously. Your evening refuge from bureaucratic warfare takes the form of a cramped study where you continue your education in classical literature, because apparently 8 hours of administrative tedium aren't sufficient. Intellectual stimulation for someone of your scholarly ambitions? The oil lamp flickers over pages of poetry so ancient that the author's graves have achieved historical landmark status. Their words preserved in collections that weigh more than most farming equipment and prove equally useful for practical purposes. You've developed the ability to read classical Chinese by lamplight while maintaining the kind of focused attention that would impress meditation masters. Though your motivation comes from career advancement rather than spiritual enlightenment, the poetry you compose during these evening sessions follows conventions so rigid they make government regulations seem flexible by comparison. Each line must demonstrate your mastery of classical forms while expressing sentiments appropriate to your social position and educational background. Your verses about seasonal changes, administrative challenges, and the noble suffering of government service, read like they were written by someone who's learned to transform genuine human emotions into literary products suitable for professional networking purposes. The irony that you recreating art about the absence of artistic freedom in your life would be amusing if you were too tired to appreciate it. Your writing desk? The same one where you remember those endless hours of calligraphy practice, now serves as a battlefield where personal expression meets social expectation in combat that leaves casualties on both sides. The poems you produce must be good enough to enhance your reputation as a cultured official while remaining safe enough to avoid any suggestion of dangerous originality. You've perfected a style that combines technical competence with emotional neutrality, creating verses that demonstrate your education while revealing nothing about your actual thoughts or feelings regarding your circumstances. The classical models you study for inspiration include works by poets who achieved fame through their ability to express profound thoughts about the human condition while maintaining appropriate respect for governmental authority. Their verses about nature, friendship, and scholarly pursuits provide templates for your own literary efforts. Though you sometimes suspect these ancient writers were better at making bureaucratic life sound meaningful than they were, at actually finding meaning in bureaucratic life, the gap between poetic idealization and lived experience grows more apparent with each passing year of service. Your poetry collection, carefully assembled in a silk-bound volume that represents months of calligraphy practice, documents your evolution from enthusiastic student to resigned professional through verses that chart the gradual replacement of youthful ambition with mature acceptance of institutional limitations. The early poems sparkle with optimism about serving the kingdom through scholarly excellence, while later works achieve a more subdued tone that suggests you've learned to find satisfaction in smaller accomplishments, like perfect brushstrokes and properly formatted reports. The evening study sessions also include continued reading in the classical texts that form the foundation of your examination preparation, because lifelong learning is expected of government officials who want to maintain their intellectual credentials. You revisit the analects with the perspective of someone who has spent years trying to implement Confucian principles and tax collection procedures. An experience that has taught you to appreciate the gap between philosophical ideals and administrative reality. These readings feel like conversations with old friends who had excellent ideas about how life should work, but limited experience with how it actually works. Historians still argue whether the scholarly pursuits that occupied officials' evening hours contributed to governmental effectiveness or simply provided intellectual hobbies for people who needed activities to fill the time between work and sleep. The classical education that prepared you for government. Service created expectations about the relationship between learning and wisdom that your daily experience has systematically undermined. Though you continue the educational process with the dedication of someone who's invested too much time to quit now. Your correspondence with fellow officials includes exchanges of poetry that serve as both intellectual exercise and social networking. Though the line between genuine friendship and professional relationship remains carefully maintained, these literary friendships provide opportunities to share your compositions with people who understand the challenges of creating art within the constraints of government employment. The feedback you receive follows diplomatic protocols that ensure everyone's ego remains intact while providing enough constructive criticism to suggest genuine engagement with your work. The late evening hours often find you staring at blank paper, while searching for inspiration that feels increasingly elusive after years of channeling your creative energy into administrative tasks. The poems you write during these moments of artistic struggle tend to focus on themes of duty, service, and the quiet satisfaction of contributing to social order through careful attention to bureaucratic detail. These verses may not achieve immortality, but they serve their purpose of demonstrating your continued commitment to the scholarly ideals that justify your position in the governmental hierarchy. Your bedtime routine includes a final review of the day's poetic efforts, editing verses with the same attention to detail you apply to tax collection reports. The poems you produce may never achieve the literary recognition of classical masters, but they provide evidence of your ongoing intellectual development and cultural refinement qualities that remain important for officials who want to maintain their standing in a system that values learning almost as much as it values conformity. Your family obligations operate on a schedule that would challenge professional event coordinators specializing in ceremonial tedium, transforming your limited free time into a series of formal gatherings, where relatives demonstrate their commitment to traditional values. Through elaborate displays of mutual tolerance, the monthly clan meetings require you to travel across the city to your father's ancestral home, a journey that involves changing into even more formal attire than your usual court dress and preparing mentally for conversations that combine family gossip with political strategy in ways that would impress diplomatic professionals working in hostile territories. The arranged marriage negotiations that dominated your 20s represented a masterpiece of social engineering, disguised as romantic courtship, where compatibility was measured through factors like family status, educational background, and demonstrated ability. To produce aesthetically pleasing calligraphy rather than trivial concerns like personal attraction or shared interests. Your wife selected through a process that resembled diplomatic treaty negotiations more than courtship, has proven to be a competent partner in the complex social choreography required for advancement in government. Circles though your relationship operates with the emotional intensity of a well-managed business partnership. Your father-in-law's expectations for your career trajectory require regular consultation sessions that feel like performance reviews conducted by someone whose investment in your success is matched only by his willingness to express disappointment in your progress. These meetings take place in his study, surrounded by books that serve as both intellectual props and subtle reminders of the scholarly achievements that justify his opinions about your professional development. His advice combines practical wisdom with impossible expectations, delivered in the patient tone of someone who's convinced that you're not trying hard enough to exceed your natural limitations. The seasonal family festivals that punctuate your calendar require attendance at gatherings that would exhaust professional entertainers specializing in formal celebrations, where the primary activity involves sitting in prescribed formations while consuming symbolic foods that taste like they were designed by committees focused on cultural significance rather than culinary pleasure. Your role in these events involves demonstrating appropriate respect for elder relatives while maintaining the dignity expected of someone whose government position reflects well on the family's social standing. A performance that requires careful calibration of humility and professional pride. Your wife's family obligations add another layer of social complexity that would challenge diplomatic professionals working in multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. Her relatives expect regular visits where you demonstrate your commitment to marital harmony through participation in conversations about topics that range from agricultural economics to classical poetry, though your contributions must be carefully modulated to suggest intellectual engagement without implying superior knowledge that might threaten established family hierarchies. These gatherings require you to remember complex relationships between people you see rarely, but whose opinions about your character carry significant weight in social circles that influence your career prospects. The children's education represents your most significant long-term investment in family advancement, though the process involves expenses that would challenge royal treasury officials working with unlimited budgets. Your eldest son's preparation for the Guagyo examinations requires tutors whose fees consume a substantial portion of your salary, while your daughter's training in appropriate feminine accomplishments demands instructors who specialize in skills that will enhance her marriage prospects without suggesting dangerous intellectual independence. The educational expenses represent both financial burden and social necessity, since family advancement depends on producing children who can surpass their parents' achievements. Historians still argue whether the Joseon family system promoted social stability or simply created elaborate mechanisms for transferring anxiety. Between generations, though, your personal experience suggests that family obligations serve primarily to ensure that no one has sufficient free time to question the fundamental assumptions underlying social organization. The intricate web of relationships, expectations, and ceremonial duties that define family life requires constant attention and diplomatic skill that would exhaust professional negotiators working in international crisis situations. Your domestic staff, consisting of servants whose wages represent another significant expense, manage household operations with the efficiency of people who understand that their employment depends on maintaining standards that reflect well on your official position. The daily routine of household management requires oversight that combines administrative skills with interpersonal diplomacy. Since domestic harmony influences your ability to focus on governmental duties without the distraction of family crises that could damage your professional reputation. The seasonal clothing changes for your entire household involve coordination that would challenge military logistics specialists. Planning complex operations across multiple theaters. Each family member requires appropriate attire for different social occasions, weather conditions, and ceremonial requirements, while maintaining the quality standards expected of people associated with government officials. The clothing expenses alone represent a significant portion of your annual budget. Though appearing in public with inadequately dressed family members would damage your professional credibility more severely than most financial hardships, your evening family dinners provide opportunities for domestic conversation that combines genuine affection with careful attention to maintaining household harmony through diplomatic management of competing interests and personalities. These meals represent the closest thing to relaxation in your daily schedule, though even family conversations require awareness of proper decorum and the subtle political dynamics that govern all human relationships in Joseon society, where family discord can have professional consequences that extend far beyond domestic inconvenience. Your transfer to Gangwon province arrives with the bureaucratic inevitability of seasonal changes, packaged in official documents that make professional exile sound like a career advancement. Opportunity designed by optimistic administrators who've never lived more than walking distance from the capital's amenities. The assignment comes with a title that sounds impressive: Regional Tax Assessment Coordinator, and responsibilities that would challenge someone with supernatural patience and an unnatural enthusiasm for agricultural mathematics. The posting represents either punishment for some unspecified failure or reward for exceptional competence, though the distinction becomes meaningless when you refacing 2 years in a mountain town where the most exciting entertainment involves watching grain grow. The journey to your new assignment takes 8 days through mountain passes that make your previous complaints about palace accommodations seem laughably ungrateful. The government wagon that transports your belongings bounces over roads that were probably surveyed by people who confused passengers. Theoretically navigable by determined pack animals, while you contemplate the geographical distance between civilization and wherever you're headed. Your traveling companions include a military escort who seems personally offended by the assignment, and a secretary whose job involves documenting the documentation of your documentation, creating layers of administrative recursion that would impress philosophers specializing in infinite regress. The town of Chunshin greets your arrival with the enthusiasm typically reserved for tax collectors and other harbingers of governmental attention, which is to say that local officials smile with expressions that suggest they're suffering from chronic digestive problems while contemplating your extended residence in their community. The temporary housing provided for your use includes amenities that make your palace quarters seem luxurious by comparison. A single room, with furniture that was probably handcrafted during the previous dynasty and heating that works according to principles that remain mysterious, despite extensive investigation by people far more qualified than yourself. Your new office occupies a building that represents the architectural equivalent of bureaucratic depression. Its rooms arranged with the efficiency of someone who understood that government work requires spaces that discourage lingering or excessive comfort. The staff consists of local clerks whose previous experience with central government procedures comes entirely from stories told by their predecessors, most of whom apparently viewed accuracy as a flexible concept and record-keeping as a form of creative writing. Your first week involves explaining basic administrative procedures to people who nod politely, while secretly planning to continue doing things the way they've always done them. The regional tax assessment protocols require you to visit farming communities that exist in states of geographical isolation that would challenge explorers equipped with modern navigation technology and unlimited time. Your inspection tours involve travel through mountain valleys where the roads disappear periodically, placed by optimistic suggestions about possible routes that might lead to destinations that probably exist somewhere in the general direction you're supposedly heading. The farmers you encounter have achieved levels of self-sufficiency that would impress survivalist enthusiasts, though their enthusiasm for governmental oversight falls somewhere between non-existent and actively hostile. Your documentation responsibilities multiply in the absence of adequate clerical support, transforming you into a one-man bureaucracy responsible for recording, copying, filing, stowing, and cross-referencing every administrative action that occurs within your jurisdiction. The provincial reporting requirements demand monthly summaries that capture the essence of regional economic activity through statistical analysis that would challenge professional mathematicians. It's working with reliable data and adequate calculating tools. Your reports achieve literary distinction through their creative interpretation of incomplete information, turning gaps in data into opportunities for bureaucratic fiction writing. Historians still argue whether provincial assignments represented essential training for government officials or simply convenient methods for removing potentially troublesome personalities from the capital S political environment. Your personal experience suggests that rural postings serve primarily to teach central government officials that administrative procedures, designed for palace efficiency, become surreal challenges when implemented in communities, where the concept of standardized record-keeping remains theoretical, and the availability of proper writing materials depends on seasonal trading patterns. The social isolation of provincial life transforms evening solitude from luxury into psychological endurance testing. Since your options for intellectual stimulation consist mainly of reviewing your own paperwork or engaging in conversations with local officials whose interests rarely extend beyond immediate practical concerns like crop yields and weather patterns, your classical education becomes a private treasure that provides comfort during long evenings. When the silence is broken only by mountain winds and the occasional sound of nocturnal wildlife that probably includes species you'd prefer not to identify. The local cuisine represents a cultural education that broadens your appreciation for palace food regardless of its previous limitations, featuring ingredients that were presumably fresh at some point during the current season and prepared with cooking techniques that emphasize functionality over aesthetic appeal. The rice wine, however, achieves standards that would satisfy even sophisticated palace tastes, though consuming too much would compromise your ability to maintain the professional dignity required for representing central government authority in remote locations. Your correspondence with colleagues in the capital becomes a lifeline that connects you to the civilized world of palace bureaucracy. Take weeks to arrive, and their contents often describe administrative developments that seem to occur in an alternate universe, where people worry about problems that would seem luxurious compared to your current challenges involving accurate grain counts and bridge maintenance in communities where engineering expertise consists primarily of traditional wisdom, passed down through generations of practical experience. Your return to the capital after 2 years of provincial exile feels like emerging from a particularly realistic nightmare about agricultural administration. Though the familiar sight of palace walls brings relief, mixed with the dawning realization that you've somehow learned to miss the simplicity of rural tax collection compared to the Byzantine complexities of central government politics. The promotion that accompanies your returned senior clerk in the Ministry of Revenue comes with a salary increase that barely covers the additional ceremonial clothing required for your elevated status and responsibilities that would challenge someone with supernatural organizational abilities and an unnatural enthusiasm for coordinating other people's paperwork about paperwork. Your new office, slightly larger than your previous workspace and equipped with a window that provides a view of other government buildings, represents the pinnacle of mid-level bureaucratic luxury within the rigid constraints of Joseon's administrative hierarchy. The desk, crafted from wood that was probably blessed by monks specializing in bureaucratic accessories, supports stacks of documents that arrive daily, like literary avalanches threatening to bury you beneath mountains of other people's administrative concerns. Your assistant, a junior clerk whose enthusiasm for governmental service remains untainted by years of practical experience, approaches each task with the energy of someone who has not yet discovered that bureaucratic efficiency is often indistinguishable from highly organized procrastination. The supervisory responsibilities that accompany your promotion require you to attend meetings about meetings, where the primary agenda involves scheduling additional meetings to discuss the effectiveness of previous meetings in addressing issues that were originally identified in meetings held before you arrived. Your calendar becomes a masterpiece of administrative tessellation, with appointments arranged so tightly that bathroom breaks require strategic planning worthy of military campaigns. The irony that you now spend more time talking about work than actually working escapes everyone except you, though mentioning this observation would mark you as dangerously practical in an environment that values process over productivity. Your budget oversight duties involve reviewing expenditure reports that document the costs of maintaining a bureaucracy dedicated to documenting its own maintenance costs, creating recursive loops of financial analysis that would fascinate mathematicians specializing in infinite regression. The accounting procedures require you to verify that money spent on administrative efficiency has been efficiently administered, while ensuring that the costs of verification don't exceed the value of the activities being verified. These calculations demand mathematical skills that would challenge professional accountants working with reliable data, though your results are expected to balance with the precision of cosmic harmony. The personnel management aspects of your position introduce you to the challenges of supervising people, whose job performance directly affects your own career prospects. It's creating a delicate balance between constructive criticism and professional self-preservation. Your subordinates approach their duties with varying degrees of competence and enthusiasm, though everyone understands that their advancement depends on making you look good, while avoiding any achievements that might threaten your position. The resulting workplace dynamics resemble a carefully choreographed dance where everyone knows the steps, but no one wants to dance too well. Historians still argue whether the Joseon promotion system rewarded genuine administrative talent or simply provided advancement opportunities for people who had survived long enough to qualify for positions requiring survival rather than excellence. Your personal experience suggests that career progression depends largely on demonstrating the ability to manage increasing levels of complexity without suffering complete mental breakdown. Though the distinction between competence and endurance becomes blurred after years of service in systems designed by people who confused activity with achievement, the social obligations that accompany your elevated rank require attendance at gatherings where successful government officials discuss the challenges of success with the intensity of philosophers contemplating the nature of existence. Though their conversations rarely transcend complaints about the quality of junior staff and the declining standards of classical education, these networking events provide opportunities to develop relationships with colleagues. Careers follow similar trajectories of gradual advancement through increasingly abstract responsibilities, creating bonds of mutual understanding based on shared experience of institutional tedium. Your evening routine now includes preparation for the next day's supervisory challenges, reviewing reports that document the progress of projects designed to improve the efficiency of systems that exist primarily to monitor their own efficiency. The documents you read before sleep achieve levels of administrative poetry that would impress critics who value bureaucratic minimalism, their pages filled with phrases that convey maximum procedural detail while expressing minimum practical information. Your bedtime reading has evolved from classical literature to governmental regulations. Though the transition feels natural after years of training in the appreciation of institutionally sanctioned tedium, the winter administrative crisis that engulfs your department arrives with the seasonal inevitability of snowfall, though considerably more devastating to your peace of mind and significantly more expensive to resolve than mere weather patterns. Provincial granary fire has destroyed tax records dating back 15 years, creating a documentation emergency that requires investigative skills worthy of master detectives and bureaucratic creativity that would challenge professional fiction writers specializing in administrative fantasy. Your role as senior clerk transforms overnight from routine supervision to crisis management, involving the reconstruction of financial history through interviews with farmers whose memories of tax payments achieve varying degrees of accuracy depending on their current relationship with governmental authority. The emergency protocols activated by this crisis require working schedules that would violate modern labor laws in approximately 23 different ways, transforming your office into a command center where exhausted officials consume questionable food while generating paperwork at rates that would impress industrial manufacturing specialists. The temporary staff assigned to assist with record reconstruction includes clerks borrowed from other departments, their enthusiasm for extra duty assignments falling somewhere between non-existent and actively mutinous. Your supervision of this emergency workforce requires diplomatic skills that would challenge professional negotiators working in active war zones. Since departmental cooperation depends on maintaining morale among people who view the crisis as someone else's problem requiring their involuntary participation, the investigative procedures involve traveling to the affected region to interview witnesses, whose testimony about historical grain transactions displays the kind of creative interpretation that would fascinate scholars studying the intersection of memory and wishful thinking. Your questioning techniques must balance the need for accurate information with the understanding that aggressive interrogation might produce responses that are technically correct but practically useless. The farmers you interview approach these sessions with the enthusiasm typically reserved for tax audits and other forms of governmental attention. Their answers carefully calibrated to provide maximum cooperation while minimizing potential future complications. The document reconstruction process requires calligraphic skills that would challenge master artisans working with unlimited time and perfect materials. Since the replacement records must achieve the same aesthetic standards as the originals, while incorporating information that exists primarily in the realm of educated guesswork, your brushwork during these marathon copying sessions achieves levels of automated precision that would impress meditation masters. Though your motivation comes from deadline pressure rather than spiritual enlightenment, The replacement documents you produce must appear authentic enough to satisfy future auditors, while remaining accurate enough to prevent administrative disasters that could trace back to your emergency reconstruction efforts. The financial implications of the crisis require calculations that would challenge professional mathematicians working with reliable data, inadequate calculating resources. Since the destroyed records contained information essential for regional tax assessment and budgetary planning, your estimates must balance the need for accuracy with the understanding that precision beyond reasonable doubt is impossible. When working with incomplete information and testimonies that exist in various states of reliability, the economic impact analysis you prepare achieves literary distinction through its creative interpretation of statistical uncertainty, transforming gaps in data into opportunities for bureaucratic optimism. Historians still argue whether the Joseon administrative system's emphasis on comprehensive documentation represented genuine efficiency or simply created employment for people who might otherwise have contributed to activities that actually produce tangible goods or services. Your personal experience with crisis management suggests that governmental record-keeping serves primarily to create the illusion of control over economic processes that operate according to principles more complex than any administrative system could effectively monitor. Though everyone involved treats the documentation process with the seriousness of people who believe that proper paperwork can prevent natural disasters. The resolution of the crisis, achieved through months of intensive investigation and creative accounting, produces replacement records that satisfy official requirements while incorporating enough flexibility to accommodate future discoveries of contradictory evidence. Your success in managing this emergency earns recognition from superior officials, who appreciate the diplomatic skills required to transform administrative disaster into bureaucratic triumph without causing political complications that might reflect poorly on departmental management. The experience provides you with expertise in crisis management that would be valuable if similar emergencies were likely to occur. Though everyone agrees that such disasters are unprecedented and unlikely to be repeated, the aftermath of the crisis leaves you with enhanced appreciation for routine administrative duties. Since regular paperwork processing seems almost recreational compared to the intellectual challenges of reconstructing financial history from incomplete evidence and unreliable witnesses, your department returns to normal operations with procedures that incorporate lessons learned from the emergency. Though the improvements mainly involve additional documentation, requirements designed to prevent future crises through the simple expedient of creating so many records that destroying them all would require efforts beyond the capabilities of most natural disasters. Your career reaches its bureaucratic zenith on a Tuesday morning so ordinary that it could serve as the definition of governmental routine when you receive notification of your final promotion to Assistant Deputy Minister of Revenue, a position that sounds impressive until you realize it mainly involves attending meetings about meetings, while supervising people who supervise other people who actually count things. The announcement arrives in a document so beautifully calligraphed that it resembles a work of art. Though its contents describe responsibilities that would challenge someone with supernatural organizational abilities and an unnatural enthusiasm for coordinating administrative coordination. Your decades of faithful service have earned you the privilege of overseeing the oversight of systems designed to monitor the monitoring of governmental efficiency. creating layers of bureaucratic recursion that would fascinate philosophers specializing in infinite regression. The farewell ceremony held in your honor features speeches that transform your career of professional tedium into something resembling heroic service to the kingdom. Though the speakers achieve this transformation through rhetorical skills that would impress professional diplomats specializing in making mundane activities sound historically significant, your colleagues present testimonials that document your contributions to departmental harmony and administrative excellence with the enthusiasm of people who understand that public praise requires careful balance between genuine appreciation and professional necessity. The ceremony concludes with a feast that includes dishes prepared with ingredients that were probably blessed by monks specializing in bureaucratic celebrations, their flavors achieving the kind of neutral excellence that offends no one while inspiring no one. Your reflection on 4 decades of government service produces insights that would interest scholars studying the intersection of human ambition and institutional inertia. Though your conclusions mainly involve the recognition that successful bureaucratic careers depend more on endurance than excellence, the skills you've developed, precise calligraphy, diplomatic communication, ceremonial patience, and the ability to find meaning in activities that would challenge normal human tolerance for organized tedium represent achievements that would be valued in any administrative system. Though their practical application outside governmental service remains theoretical, your expertise in tax collection procedures, personnel management, and crisis resolution has prepared you for retirement activities that mainly involve contemplating the philosophical implications of a life spent in service to administrative perfection. The retirement benefits provided by the Joseon government include a pension that covers basic living expenses and housing in a compound designed for elderly officials who have earned the right to spend their remaining years discussing the administrative challenges of their former careers with people who share similar experiences of institutional dedication. Your fellow retirees approach their leisure time with the same methodical attention to detail that characterize their professional lives, grading social organizations that operate according to principles that would be familiar to anyone who has worked in governmental administration. The conversations at these gatherings focus on topics that would bore civilian populations into catatonic states. Though everyone involved treats discussions about proper filing procedures and optimal meeting schedules with the seriousness of people who have discovered that bureaucratic excellence represents the highest form of human achievement. Your evening routine now includes extended periods of meditation on the cosmic significance of administrative service, contemplating questions that would challenge philosophers, specializing in the meaning of existence within institutional constraints. The books you read before sleep consist mainly of classical texts about governance and moral philosophy, though your interpretation of these works incorporates insights gained from decades of practical experience in translating theoretical principles into bureaucratic procedures. Your writing during these quiet hours produces poetry that captures the essence of governmental service with the precision of someone who has learned to find beauty in activities that exist primarily to create order from chaos. The seasonal changes that once marked administrative cycles now provide opportunities for reflection on the eternal rhythms that govern human existence within social systems designed to outlast their individual participants. Your garden, maintained with the same meticulous attention to detail that characterized your professional paperwork, produces vegetables that achieve the kind of organized growth that would satisfy anyone who appreciates the aesthetic possibilities of systematic cultivation. The harvest from your retirement gardening provides food that tastes like it was grown by someone who understands that proper care and attention can transform even the most mundane activities into expressions of human dedication to excellence. Your legacy, documented in personnel files that will probably outlast the dynasty itself, consists mainly of evidence that you successfully navigated a career in government service without causing any administrative disasters that could be traced back to your specific decisions or actions. The records you leave behind achieve the kind of bureaucratic immortality that would satisfy anyone who measures success through the absence of documented failures rather than the presence of notable achievements. Your contribution to the kingdom's administrative efficiency remains invisible to civilian populations. Though future government officials will benefit from systems that operate according to principles refined through your decades of faithful service to the eternal project of making bureaucratic excellence indistinguishable from cosmic harmony, historians will probably never mention your name in chronicles of the Joseon dynasty, though your influence on governmental procedures will persist through the invisible networks of administrative tradition that connect past and future through the timeless dedication of officials who understand that civilization depends on people willing to spend their lives ensuring that paperwork gets processed correctly and meetings run on schedule. Your career represents the kind of unglamorous but essential service that makes possible the visible achievements of kings and generals, though recognition of such contributions remains limited to people who understand that empires are built on foundations of properly maintained tax records and efficiently managed grain inventories. As you drift toward sleep on this final evening of our bureaucratic journey, surrounded by the familiar silence of organized efficiency and the gentle satisfaction of duties completed according to proper procedures, you can rest assured that your life's work has contributed to the eternal project of maintaining social order through the simple expedient of making sure that everything gets counted, recorded, filed, and forgotten with the precision that only comes from decades of practice in the art of administrative perfection. The kingdom sleeps peacefully tonight, secure in the knowledge that its taxes have been properly collected and its bureaucracy continues to operate according to principles that have successfully prevented chaos through the remarkable achievement of making government service so thoroughly boring that revolution seems like too much work for anyone to bother attempting. Sweet dreams, faithful servant of the realm.